Arthur looked at the woman sleeping peacefully on the white linen sheets and felt a cold shiver that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. In his hand, he held her phone, its screen glowing with a message that made his 30 years of architectural precision feel like a house of cards. He had come to the Philippines to build a future, but he was standing in the middle of a perfectly designed ruins. How does a man like Arthur, rational, successful, and careful, fall into a trap that was visible from space? To understand the end, we have to go back to the moment the cabin door opened and the heat of Manila changed his life forever. The Boeing 777 tilted its wing over the scattered emerald jewels of the Philippine archipelago. Arthur stared out the window, watching the white foam of the Pacific break against hidden reefs. For the first time in his 55 years, he wasn't traveling with a return ticket in his mind. Bristol was a grey memory now. The office, the empty house, and the divorce papers were buried under 10,000 miles of ocean. He adjusted his glasses and checked his reflection in the small window. He looked like a man on a mission, clean-shaven, wearing a crisp linen shirt, and carrying a secret in his breast pocket. The secret was a velvet box, and inside it was a promise. As the wheels hit the tarmac with a violent thud, the passengers around him began to cheer. Arthur didn't cheer. He breathed. The air in the cabin changed, turning from filtered oxygen to something thick, sweet, and heavy. He stepped out of the plane and into the jet bridge, feeling the tropical humidity wrap around him like a damp wool coat. It was the smell of diesel, sugarcane, and something ancient. The immigration hall was a chaotic sea of people from every corner of the globe. Arthur stood in the foreign passport line, watching the ceiling fans spin lazily overhead. He felt like a teenager again, his palms slightly damp as he reached for his documents. He had been talking to Maya for 18 months, thousands of hours of video calls and millions of typed words. He knew the shape of her smile and the sound of her laughter through a laptop speaker. But as he walked through the nothing to declare exit, a sudden fear gripped him. What if the screen had lied? What if the girl who saved him from his loneliness didn't exist in the light of day? He pushed the luggage trolley through the sliding glass doors into the madness of the arrivals area. Thousands of faces blurred past him, names written on cardboard, drivers shouting, families weeping with joy. And then the world stopped moving. She was standing by a concrete pillar, wearing a simple yellow dress that glowed against her tan skin. She looked smaller, more fragile than she did on the high-definition camera. Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then Maya broke into a run, her sandals clicking against the tile floor. She threw herself into his arms with such force that Arthur had to step back to keep his balance. "You're here," she sobbed into his chest. "You're really, really here." Arthur buried his face in her hair, smelling the scent of jasmine and the salt of the sea. "I told you I would come," he whispered, his voice cracking with emotion. He felt a surge of protective love so strong it made his head swim. He looked down at her, seeing the tears in her eyes, and felt like the luckiest man in the world. He didn't notice the way she quickly glanced at his luggage, noting the designer labels on his bags. He didn't see the brief, sharp look she gave a man standing near the taxi stand, a man who nodded back and walked away. Maya took his hand, her fingers small and warm in his. "The car is waiting, Arthur," she said, pulling him toward the exit. "I have so much to show you, and we have a long way to go before we reach the island." As they stepped into the blinding Manila sunlight, Arthur felt like he was finally walking into his real life. He had no idea that every step he took had been choreographed months ago. The trap was set, the bait was beautiful, and Arthur was walking into it with his eyes wide shut. The internal flight from Manila to Bohol was a blur of cotton candy clouds and Arthur's own racing heart. Maya sat close to him, her hand resting on his thigh, a constant reminder that he wasn't dreaming. As the small plane descended, the famous chocolate hills appeared below like giant emerald drops. "This is my home," Maya whispered, pointing toward the coastline of Panglao. "It's more beautiful than the photos," Arthur replied, his mind already calculating where the terrace of their house would sit. They landed at the small airport, where the air was even thicker and smelled of sun-baked earth. A dark-skinned man with a wide, friendly smile was waiting by a battered silver SUV. "This is John, my cousin," Maya introduced him, her voice light and casual. Jun shook Arthur's hand with a grip that felt like rough leather. "Welcome to paradise, Sir Arthur," Jun said, loading the expensive suitcases into the back of the car. Arthur noticed that Jun's eyes lingered a bit too long on the gold ring on Arthur's finger. As they drove toward the beach, the scenery changed from lush jungle to turquoise glimpses of the sea. They arrived at a luxury resort, where the villas were tucked away behind walls of hibiscus and bougainvillea. Arthur had insisted on the best, wanting to show Maya the life that awaited her. "I'll leave you two birds alone," Jun laughed, giving Maya a look that Arthur interpreted as brotherly affection. In the privacy of their villa, Arthur opened his suitcase and pulled out a bottle of vintage champagne he'd carried from London. The pop of the cork sounded like a starting pistol for the rest of his life. "To us," he said, raising a crystal glass. "To the house," Maya added, her eyes shining with an intensity that Arthur found intoxicating. After dinner, as the moon began to rise over the Bohol Sea, the conversation turned to the land. "The owner, Mr. Santos, is very traditional," Maya explained, leaning against Arthur on the balcony. "He doesn't like dealing with big corporations. He wants a good man to take over his family's property." Arthur felt a swell of pride. He was that good man, the protector she had been waiting for. "He is asking for 3 million pesos as a down payment to secure the title from the bank," she continued. "But he needs it in cash, or a direct transfer to his personal account by Monday." In Bristol, Arthur would have laughed at such a request. In Bristol, he was a man of contracts, solicitors, and escrow accounts. But here, under the intoxicating scent of the night-blooming jasmine, the rules felt different. He looked at Maya, her face bathed in silver moonlight, and saw only innocence. "I'll arrange the transfer tomorrow morning," Arthur said, feeling a sense of noble sacrifice. Maya kissed him then, a kiss that tasted of mangoes and something metallic, like copper. She drifted off to sleep quickly, but Arthur stayed awake, listening to the rhythmic pulse of the ocean. Around 2 a.m., her phone, lying on the bedside table, lit up with a silent notification. Arthur didn't intend to look, but the light was bright in the pitch-black room. The message on the lock screen was short. "Is the fish salted yet?" Arthur frowned, his architectural mind trying to find the logic in a phrase about fish at 2 a.m. He told himself it was just local slang, a joke from her cousin John about dinner. He closed his eyes, forcing his doubts back into the shadows of the room. He wanted so badly to believe in the dream that he was willing to ignore the smell of the smoke. He fell asleep, dreaming of blueprints, unaware that the foundations were already rotting beneath him. The morning sun in Panglao was a blinding, uncompromising white. Arthur sat on the veranda of the villa, a silver pot of coffee between him and Maya. He had spent the morning reviewing the preliminary deed she had printed out at the hotel's business center. To his trained eye, the document looked a bit thin, lacking the official seals he was used to in the UK. The laws are different here, Arthur, Maya said, as if reading his thoughts. Everything is about trust and family connections. The paperwork is just a formality for the local government. She touched the back of his hand, her fingers tracing the veins in his palm. Mr. Santos is waiting for us at the cafe near the municipal hall, she added softly. Arthur nodded, pushing his doubts into a small box in the back of his mind. They met Mr. Santos in a dimly lit air-conditioned cafe that smelled of stale cigarettes and burnt sugar. Santos was an older man in a faded barong shirt, his face a map of wrinkles and calculated smiles. Cousin John was already there, sitting in the corner like a silent sentinel. The landowner spoke very little English, so Maya acted as the bridge, her voice rising and falling in rapid Tagalog. Every time Arthur asked a technical question about the land title or the tax declaration, Maya would translate. Santos would then nod vigorously, point at a map and say, "Good land, sir. Very good for house." Arthur pulled his laptop from his bag to show them the 3D renders he had designed in Bristol. He showed them the infinity pool, the glass-walled study, and the master bedroom overlooking the cliffside. John leaned in, whistling through his teeth as he stared at the digital luxury. "You are a very rich man, Sir Arthur," Jun remarked, his eyes reflecting the glow of the screen. "I am a man who has worked hard for 40 years, Jun." Arthur corrected him gently. The moment of the transaction arrived, like a heavy curtain falling. Arthur opened his banking app, the security tokens flashing on his phone. He felt a momentary pang of vertigo as he looked at the amount, 50,000 British pounds. It was the bulk of his liquid savings, the nest egg he had protected during his divorce. "Once I hit send, when do we get the original transfer certificate of title?" Arthur asked. Maya spoke to Santos, who reached into a plastic folder and pulled out a photocopy of a document. "He says the original is at the bank being released from the mortgage," Maya explained. "As soon as the transfer clears, the bank gives it to us, and we go to the Register of Deeds together." Arthur looked at the photocopy. The edges were blurry, and the name on the top was Maria Cristobal, not Santos. "Who is Maria?" Arthur asked, his thumb hovering over the confirm button. "His late mother," Maya replied, without a second of hesitation. "The inheritance paperwork is being finalized." It was a logical explanation in a country where land ownership is often a family labyrinth. Arthur took a deep breath, thinking of the loneliness of his house in Bristol. He pressed confirm. The screen blinked. Transaction successful. Maya let out a small gasp and squeezed his arm, her eyes shining with what looked like tears of relief. Santos stood up, shook Arthur's hand briefly, and vanished into the bright street with Jun close behind. "We did it, Arthur," Maya whispered, leaning her head on his shoulder. "We have a home." That evening, to celebrate, they went to a high-end restaurant on Alona Beach. The wine was expensive, the lobster was fresh, and Maya was more affectionate than ever. But as the night wore on, she seemed distracted, her hand constantly dipping into her purse to check her phone. "Is everything all right with your mother?" Arthur asked, noticing her furrowed brow. "Oh, yes," she said, forcing a smile. "Just Paolo. He's having trouble with his school fees again." Arthur felt a slight tighten in his chest, a subtle shift in the atmosphere. He had just transferred £50,000, and already there was another small fire to put out. While she went to the restroom, she left her purse on the chair, its zipper slightly open. Her phone buzzed, a short, sharp vibration that made the purse slide an inch on the fabric. Arthur glanced down and saw a message on the preview screen, but it wasn't in Tagalog, it was in German. "Wann kommst du nach Hause, Schatz?" He didn't speak German, but he knew enough from his travels to know that Schatz meant darling. His heart gave a strange, sickening thud, like a bird hitting a window pane. He looked at the restroom door, then back at the phone, feeling the first real drop of ice in his blood. He told himself it was a wrong number, an old friend, a cousin working in Europe. But the foundation of the paper fortress had just developed its first visible crack. The ice in Arthur's blood didn't melt with the morning sun. He woke up early, the tropical heat already pressing against the villa's windows like an intruder. Maya was still asleep, her dark hair splayed across the pillow like silk, looking utterly innocent. Arthur sat on the edge of the bed, his mind replaying the German word from the night before. Schatz. He was an architect. He knew that if one beam was out of alignment, the entire roof was destined to collapse. He walked out to the living area and opened his laptop, but he didn't open his design software. He opened a translation tool and typed in the message he had seen. "When are you coming home, darling?" The words stared back at him from the screen, cold and undeniable. He felt a hollow sensation in his stomach, a vacuum where his hope used to be. He began to look at the land documents again, but this time he didn't look at the names. He looked at the metadata. He had scanned the PDF Maya gave him to his cloud drive the day before. He checked the file properties and saw that the document had been edited 3 days ago using a common photo editing app. A tax declaration should be a scanned government paper, not a digital composition. Arthur felt a bead of sweat roll down his spine, and it wasn't from the humidity. He needed to know more, but he felt like a spy in his own life. When Maya finally woke up, she was glowing, talking about a celebration trip to the nearby islands. "I have to go into town to check on the bank transfer, Arthur," she said, kissing his cheek. "You stay here, relax by the pool, and I will be back in 2 hours." Arthur nodded, forcing a smile that felt like a plastic mask. "Of course, darling. Take your time." As soon as the silver SUV pulled out of the driveway, Arthur called a tricycle, the local motorized taxi. "Take me to the municipal hall," he told the driver. The ride was bumpy and loud, the wind whipping his hair, but Arthur was focused. He walked into the assessor's office, a cramped room filled with stacks of yellowing paper and the hum of old fans. He showed the clerk the photocopy of the land title Maria Cristobal had inherited. "I want to verify the status of this property," Arthur said, sliding a 500 peso note across the desk. The clerk, a woman with tired eyes, looked at the note and then at the paper. She typed something into a computer that looked like it belonged in the 90s. "Sir, this property is not for sale," she said after a long silence. "It belongs to a corporation based in Manila. They are building a resort there next year." Arthur felt the floor tilt beneath his feet. "And the owner? Is it Maria Cristobal?" The clerk shook her head. "No, Maria Cristobal is a local name, but she died 10 years ago and had no land in this district." Arthur walked out into the street, the sun feeling like a physical weight on his shoulders. He realized then that the Santos he met was just an actor in a very expensive play. He realized that the £50,000 hadn't gone to a bank. It had gone into a black hole. He felt the urge to scream, to find John and Santos and demand his life back. But then he remembered the German message. He realized that he wasn't the only investor in Maya's portfolio. He went to a small internet cafe, away from the tourist eyes, and did something he never thought he would do. He searched for Maya's photo, using a reverse image search tool. The results populated the screen like a deck of cards being shuffled. There she was on a German dating site as Christina. There she was on an Australian forum, where a man was warning others about a sweet girl from Bohol who took his savings for a fake surgery. Arthur sat in the dark, cramped booth, the blue light of the monitor aging him 10 years in 10 minutes. He saw his own life reflected in the stories of these other men, the same scripts, the same sick mother, the same brother's tuition. He felt a profound sense of shame, a humiliation that burned deeper than the financial loss. He had been the big fish, just as the message to Jun had said. He looked at his watch. Maya would be back at the villa soon, expecting him to be the happy, oblivious architect. He stood up, his legs shaking, and walked out into the heat. He wasn't going to be a victim anymore, but he wasn't going to be a fool either. He needed to see the full extent of the theatre before he burned the stage down. He headed back to the resort, his mind already drawing the blueprints for a very different kind of ending. Arthur returned to the villa just minutes before the silver SUV pulled into the gravel driveway. He sat on the terrace, a glass of lukewarm water in his hand, watching the dust settle. Maya hopped out of the car, looking radiant, carrying a bag of fresh mangoes and a bottle of local rum. "The bank says the funds are processing, Arthur," she chirped, throwing her arms around him. Arthur felt a physical revulsion at her touch, but he forced his muscles to remain still. "That's wonderful news, Maya," he said, his voice a flat, hollow echo of his former warmth. He watched her as she moved into the kitchen, humming a popular Filipino love song. He realized she wasn't just a liar. She was a professional, an artist whose medium was human hope. "I've been thinking," Arthur said, standing in the doorway of the kitchen. "Since the land is secured, I want to take a look at your phone to show Jun some of the interior renders I made." Maya froze for a fraction of a second, her hand midair as she sliced a mango. "Oh, my phone is charging, Arthur, and the screen's cracked. I don't want you to cut your fingers." It was a clumsy lie, the first one he had truly recognized as such. "I don't mind," he said, stepping closer, his shadow falling over her. "Actually, I noticed a message last night, something about a Schatz." The knife stopped moving completely. The silence in the villa became heavy, pressurized, like the air before a typhoon. Maya turned slowly, her face shifting from the sweet girl to a mask of cold, hard calculation. The transition was fascinating and terrifying to watch. "You were spying on me, Arthur?" she asked, her voice dropping an octave, losing its melodic lilt. "I was verifying my investment, Maya," he replied, leaning against the counter, "and I found out that I'm not the only architect building a house in your heart." She didn't cry. She didn't beg for forgiveness. She simply set the knife down and leaned against the sink, crossing her arms. "You Westerners come here thinking you can buy a life like you buy a souvenir," she said, her eyes flashing with a sudden, sharp bitterness. "You think £50,000 makes you a king. It makes you a target." Arthur felt the sting of the words, mostly because he knew there was a grain of truth in them. "Where is the money, Maya?" he asked quietly. She laughed, a short, dry sound that chilled him more than the German message. "The money's gone, Arthur. It's in the house for my children, it's in the school for my real brothers, it's in the pockets of the people who make sure you don't make trouble." Arthur realized then that Cousin Jun was likely not a cousin at all, but the man he had seen in the internet forum warnings. "I've seen the German sites, Maya. I've seen the Australian warnings. I know about Dieter and Gary." She shrugged, reaching into her purse and pulling out a cigarette, lighting it with a steady hand. "Then you know how this ends," she said, blowing a cloud of smoke toward the ceiling. "You go back to Bristol, you tell your friends you had a beautiful holiday, and you never come back." Arthur looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the wreckage of his own vanity. "I am an architect, Maya," he said, his voice gaining a sudden, terrifying clarity. "I don't just build things. I know how to take them apart." He pulled a small USB drive from his pocket and laid it on the counter. "I didn't just go to the municipal hall today," he lied, though his voice sounded perfectly convinced. "I have a friend at the British Embassy in Manila, and I've already sent them the digital trail of every transfer, every fake document, and the names of everyone involved." He watched the first flicker of genuine fear cross her face. "This isn't just a broken heart, Maya. This is international wire fraud and document forgery." In reality, Arthur had no such friend, but he knew the one thing people like Maya feared was the light. "I'm leaving now," Arthur said, picking up his small carry-on bag, which he had already packed. "You can keep the suitcases in the bedroom. They're filled with things I no longer need." He walked toward the door, his heart finally slowing down, a strange peace settling over him. "Arthur!" she called out, her voice cracking, reaching for the old sweetness one last time. He didn't turn around. He walked out into the heat toward a waiting tricycle he had called earlier. He didn't go to the land he thought he owned. He went straight to the airport. As the tricycle rattled down the dusty road, he saw Jun parked in the shadows of a mahogany tree. Arthur didn't hide. He looked Jun straight in the eye and gave a small, polite nod. The predator recognized the prey had escaped the trap, and for a moment there was a silent respect between them. Arthur sat in the departure lounge, watching the sun set over the Bohol Sea for the last time. The sky was a bruised purple and gold, a masterpiece of natural beauty that cost nothing to look at. He pulled the velvet box from his pocket and looked at the diamond ring. With a flick of his wrist, he tossed it into a nearby trash bin. He was 55. He was 50,000 pounds poorer, and he was alone. But as he boarded the plane, he felt lighter than he had in 20 years. He had lost his money, but he had found the one thing he didn't realize he was missing: the truth. The engines roared to life, and as the island vanished into the darkness, Arthur closed his eyes. He wasn't dreaming of blueprints anymore. He was dreaming of the rain in Bristol, and for the first time, it felt like home.